Two women are dead. Other women were hurt. The evidence is horrifying. The behavior is not mysterious, romantic, or misunderstood. And yet somehow the internet looks at the person responsible and says, but he is kind of hot. And that is not just disturbing, that is a warning sign about how easily beauty can corrupt empathy. Hello, hello! Welcome back to Smart AF, the show where we cut through the noise and give you the facts, straight up. Today we are talking about the phenomenon exposed again by the Netflix doco, Worst Ex Ever. Why dangerous people sometimes become objects of obsession, why attractiveness can distort moral judgment, and why victims are often forced to compete with the criminal's face for public attention. And I want to be clear from the start, this episode is not about pretending attraction is simple. It is not about shaming every person who has ever noticed that someone dangerous is physically attractive. Human brains are complicated. Attraction is complicated. But romanticizing a murderer, sending fan mail, making thirst edits, defending them in comment sections, or turning them into some misunderstood internet fantasy is not harmless. That is where fascination starts becoming erasure. The case that brought this conversation back into the spotlight is Wade Wilson, featured in Worst Ex Ever, Season 2. Wilson was convicted of murdering Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz, and the case also includes women who survived encounters with him before those murders. But what made the public reaction especially disturbing was not only the violence, it was what happened after. The fan mail, the focus on his appearance, the way his mugshot became part of the conversation, the way people started talking about him as if his face somehow complicated what he had done. And that is the part that makes this bigger than one case. This episode is not just about Wade Wilson. He is the entry point. The pattern is much bigger, because this has happened again and again. Famous criminals get admirers, murderers get love letters, inmates get marriage proposals, fictional killers get fan edits, dangerous people get romanticized because they are attractive, charismatic, mysterious, famous, or packaged like characters instead of real human beings who caused real harm. And before anyone turns this into a lazy men versus women conversation, that is not what this is. This is not about one gender being uniquely irrational. This is about attraction, fantasy, fame, and the way beauty can make people excuse things they would condemn instantly in someone less appealing. That is where we need to talk about the halo effect. The halo effect is when one positive trait influences how people judge everything else about a person. If someone is attractive, people may unconsciously assume they are kinder, safer, smarter, more trustworthy, or less guilty than they actually are. And that is the uncomfortable part. A violent crime does not become less violent because the person responsible photographs well. A dangerous person does not become safer because people find them attractive. But human judgment is not as objective as we like to pretend. We are influenced by faces, tone, confidence, charm, status, and presentation far more than we want to admit. This is why the hot criminal reaction matters. Not because noticing someone's appearance makes you a terrible person, but because attraction can soften the way people process harm. It can make someone seem more complicated, more tragic, more misunderstood, or somehow less responsible than they actually are. And when that happens, the victims start disappearing from the center of the story. There is even a term for attraction to people who commit crimes: hybristophilia. Sometimes it is called the Bonnie and Clyde syndrome. But I do not want to get too stuck on the clinical label, because the label is not the most disturbing part. The disturbing part is how ordinary the behavior can start to look once it is wrapped in internet culture. A love letter becomes a comment becomes an edit becomes a joke becomes a fandom. And suddenly, what should feel horrifying starts being treated like content. Before social media, someone might privately write a letter to a prisoner. Now that same impulse can become a TikTok edit, a comment section, a fan account, a meme, or a whole debate. And once it becomes content, it gets rewarded. Likes reward it, comments reward it, outrage rewards it. The algorithm does not ask whether this is healthy, respectful, or fair to the victims. It asks whether people are watching. That is where true crime can cross a line. True crime can educate people. It can expose failures. It can help people understand coercive control, stalking, escalation, intimate partner violence, and the systems that fail victims. But it can also turn real people into characters. The killer becomes the villain with a fandom, the survivor becomes a plot device, the victims become backstory. And online, almost anything can become aesthetic. Crime becomes aesthetic, danger becomes aesthetic, a mugshot becomes aesthetic, a murderer becomes a type. And once that happens, the focus shifts. The conversation becomes less about what they did and more about how they look, what they might be like, whether they are misunderstood, whether they had trauma, whether someone could have saved them, whether they are secretly soft, broken, romantic, or deep. The TV show You is such a good fictional mirror for this. Joe Goldberg was never supposed to be aspirational. He was a warning. He was obsessive, controlling, violent, manipulative, and dangerous. But for years, parts of the audience kept softening him. People joked about him, defended him, romanticized him, turned him into a misunderstood romantic lead. And by the end, the show basically turns the camera back on the audience. Because the monster was never hiding because nobody could see him. He was hiding because people kept choosing the version of him they preferred. The romantic one, the damaged one, the misunderstood one, the one with the good face and the tragic backstory. And that is exactly what happens when real dangerous people become internet fantasies. When people obsess over whether the offender is handsome, beautiful, charming, lonely, traumatized, or misunderstood, something else happens. The victims disappear from the frame. Their names get smaller. Their lives get less attention. Their deaths become background context for someone else's mythology. And that is the ugliest part of all of this. The fan mail is not just weird, it is insulting. It recenters the offender's face, charm, loneliness, trauma, or so-called potential, while the people they hurt become secondary in their own story. Suddenly, the public remembers the mugshot, the edits, the fan attention, the fantasy. But the victims have to fight to be remembered at all. And this exposes a nasty contradiction in how society talks about victims. People love asking, how did they not see the warning signs? But then, when the same dangerous person is presented to the public, people get distracted by charm, looks, confidence, mystery, or a tragic backstory. So we judge victims for being fooled privately while proving in public that those same surface-level signals work on us too. That does not make victims foolish. It means manipulation can be effective. Charm can work. Beauty can work. Performance can work. And we should be much more humble about how easily danger can be misread when it comes in attractive packaging. So no, the answer is not to pretend attractive criminals do not exist. That would be ridiculous. People have eyes. The answer is to notice when attraction starts changing the moral weight of the story. Ask yourself, would I feel the same way if this person looked different? Would I be this interested if they were not physically appealing? Am I focusing more on the offender's image than on the people they harmed? Because beauty is not evidence. Attractiveness is not innocence. A tragic backstory is not a pardon. A good face is not a character reference, and a prison sentence is not a dating profile. The real story here is not just that some dangerous people get attention. The real story is how quickly our culture knows how to build that attention. A face circulates. A few people say, "Hear me out." Someone makes an edit. Someone else turns it into a joke. The algorithm notices the engagement, and suddenly victims are competing with the person who harmed them for public sympathy. That should disturb us, not because attraction makes someone evil, but because attraction can make people careless. Careless with empathy, careless with victims, careless with reality. So the next time the internet tries to turn a violent person into a misunderstood heartthrob, ask the better question. Who disappeared from the frame so they could become the main character? Because the truth is usually not in the mugshot. It is not in the fantasy. It is not in the fan mail. It is not in the comments saying, "But they are hot." The truth is in the people who were hurt, the people who are no longer here, the survivors who should not have to watch the world flirt with the person who harmed them. This is not about gender. It is about what attraction can do to judgment. Because sometimes the red flag is not that we cannot see the danger. It is that we see it and still try to explain it. We see it and still try to soften it. We see it and still try to turn it into something romantic. And that is what romanticizing danger really is. Because sometimes the problem is not that danger is hidden. Sometimes the problem is that danger is visible, and people still line up to defend it. That's it for today's episode of Smart AF. And remember, making informed decisions is your right. So before you believe the hype, get Smart AF. See you soon. Thanks for listening. If you know someone who needs this info, please share this video with them. If you found this interesting, a thumbs up and subscribe would mean a lot. And tap the bell so you never miss an update.